KaraokeBooks.
The Golden Cockerel. Written by Aleksandr Pushkin. Translated by Daniel Pratt. Once upon a time long gone, in a far and distant land, in a kingdom old and grand, there lived the Tsar they called Dayton. From his youth he was quite terrible. To his neighbors he was unbearable. But as he aged, he wanted to rest, and from his fighting be refreshed, to give himself at last some peace and quiet. But his neighbors began to riot, and they brought him such awful harm, and set the kingdom to alarm. On the land his army waited, but from the sea they rose unabated. Angry tears ran down his face in streams, and Dayton forgot his peaceful dreams. What an awful life in this despair! And so he turned with pleas and prayer to a sage, a wise man and stargazer. He sent for him an emissary, bowing low as is customary. The wise man came before Dayton, and from his bag thereupon pulled a golden cockerel. Set this bird upon the tallest spire, he said to his majestic mighty sire, and my golden cockerel in the sky will be your guardian up on high. When the world around acts peacefully, so the cockerel will be equally. But if war awaits from any side, if any fighting force is spied, or far off another hazard lurks, my little bird will set to work. He will raise his wings and crow and flap, alerting you to any trap, pointing at the very place where the danger sits and waits. Tsar Dayton gave the wise man thanks, promising gold from all his banks. For a gift such as the golden bird, gave the Tsar his mighty word. Your dearest wish I will fulfill, as if it came from my majestic will. Ask of me whatever your desire, and that you shall acquire. He set the cockerel on the highest steeple, watching over the kingdom's people, as the wise man promised Tsar Dayton. On the spire the cock raised his comb, flapped his wings, cock-a-doodle-doo. There you must send your armies to. Then the neighbors changed their minds, and stopped fighting on all sides. Tsar Dayton gave them such rebuff, that the neighbors no longer felt so tough. 1 year passed and then another, and the cockerel raised no bother. But then at once the Tsar Dayton was woken and was called upon. Tsar our father, our one true king, said one commander clamoring. King, my liege, there is disaster. The yawning Tsar was still in bed, and asked the captain, what's the matter? Through the city there is fear and dread, said the captain to his master. In the city fear is growing, for the cock has started crowing. Tsar Dayton got up to look all the faster, and saw the cockerel cry and beat his wings. And to the east the cockerel sings, with no reason to delay. The Tsar called out, my people do not tarry. He sent his army off to war that day, his oldest son the captain of the military. At once the cock grew calmer, and the city became less somber. For a week there was no word of either battle won or deferred, not a single message for the king. But then again the cock was crowing. He sent his army off to war immediately, his other son the captain of the army. At once the cock grew calmer, and the city became less somber. For a week there was no word of either battle won or deferred, not a single message for the king. But then once again the cock was crowing, and the Tsar himself led his army to the east, not knowing if there was use in the least. Tsar Dayton marched day and night, but they did not find a single sight. There was neither camp nor battle, nor burial ground along their travel. After 1 week had elapsed, they came upon a mountain pass, and in between the rocky heights, there stood a pavilion gold and white. Tsar Dayton and his army gaped in fright, for all around the pavilion in the pass lay dead and conquered all his knights. Tsar Dayton rushed through the meadow grass. He saw the awful image before the tent of both his sons, without lance or movement. They were run through by each other's blades, their horses roaming through the nearby glades. Through the grass the army trampled low, wandering through the bloodied meadow. My sons, the old Tsar wept. Woe is me, for both my hawks have been caught in a net. Alas, alas! I will die of shock. Dayton's army all let out an awful wail that resounded through the vale. With a heavy sigh the mountain shook, and suddenly the pavilion opened up. Out stepped a princess, a royal shamakar, shining like the morning star, and peacefully walked to meet the Tsar, squinting like an owl before the sun. Captivated by her bewitching eyes, the Tsar was instantly undone. Forgetting the tragic death of sons and allies, she smiled broadly at the Tsar, and bowing low took him by the arm, and led him to her tent. She sat him at her table, and gave him all she was able, and then brought him to lie and rest upon her bed richly dressed. For an entire week he lay, completely under the lady's sway. As he ate and lavished with this temptress, the Tsar was fascinated and smitten with the princess. At last with his whole retinue, and the young princess too, the Tsar set out again for his domain. Before him gossip ran unchained. Both fact and fiction were related. Close to the capital, near the gates, the nation met them with great fanfare, running around them in the square. Around the royal pair, Dayton greeted them one and all. And then he saw one standing tall, in a saracen cap dressed in white, like a swan in the bright sunlight. The sage, the wise man and stargazer. "Oh, greetings, my old friend. How are you?" the Tsar commended. "What is your wish, but do come closer." The wise man greeted his royal sire. "We see each other once again. Do you remember our old bargain? You promised me my first desire. If I made it known, you'd fulfill it as your own. Please give me this woman, this princess of Shamakhan." The Tsar was quite amazed. "Who are you?" he roared at the mage. "Have you been possessed by some demon? Or have you merely lost your reason? I am really quite astonished. Of course I swore and promised, but there are limits in the instance. What could you want with this princess? Do you really know who I am? Ask for something else, wise man. Ask for my mightiest steed, or high rank. Ask for all the money from my banks. I'll give you half of my kingdom. I want only this young woman. There's nothing else you can give me, other than the Shamakhan Rani." The wise man said in answer to the Tsar. Dayton spat. "Oh, no, too bold by far. Now you'll get nothing at all. You've harmed yourself by your gall. Be gone while you still may. Guards, take this old man away." The wise man wanted another answer, but it was unwise to raise a quarrel. The Tsar swung hard with his staff, and hit the sage and laid him low. The whole city cried, but the princess merely laughed. He, oh, ho, ho, ho. Do not be afraid of sin, you see. The Tsar was troubled greatly, but smiled at her straightly. But lo, just as he entered his town, a bell quite softly sounded, and before the crowd astounded, the cockerel swiftly flew down, and settled upon the old Tsar's crown. He pecked at his head and rose, and Dayton fell from these blows. He gasped once, and then he died, and then too disappeared his bride. As if it all of this had not come to. This tale has little in it true, but there is a hint of some sure truth, and a lesson here for all good youth.
KaraokeBooks.